ghosts and vampires and werewolves and murder. Oh my god! I'm so sorry I did not see you there. Well, since you're here, I think it would be a cool idea to share with you some of my personal favorite films. Some of my personal favorite movies in the horror sphere. Hang on one second, I gotta let my little assistant in. Miss Lemon is joining us because she wants some new recommendations for the spookiest season of them all, the month of October. This is an eclectic list, a variety of horror films for a very festive October. I've got 10 on this list, so if you have anything that you feel belongs on this list, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Hello and welcome to the Quiet Riot, where we talk film, television, media with an emphasis on old movies and nostalgic favorites. I would like to send out a full hearty welcome to all the new subscribers and to those that are watching for the first time. I love to have you and I'm so happy that you are here. And if you decide to subscribe after watching this video, I'm so thankful for that. And if you want to and you like this video, give it a like and subscribe and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post. If you haven't already, this will help me appease the algorithm demons. They really just want the most from us. They really do. Thank you again, and let's get into it. Let's talk horror movies and suspense films and thrillers. To share with you today is The Spiral Staircase. I've discussed it on this platform before. I will have it put in the description box below, and it is fairly easy to find both on this site and elsewhere. And The Spiral Staircase is a suspense thriller and a precursor to the early slasher. You can certainly see a lot of elements that would come with another early slasher such as Psycho, and will be done more in later films, including Black Christmas released in '74 and Halloween released in '78 and others that followed. The film follows a young woman who lives with mutism, and she becomes the latest victim, or she becomes the latest stalking victim of a serial killer who is targeting young women with disabilities. The way disabilities is handled in this film is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. After all, the film was made in the 1940s, and during that time there weren't a lot of movies that, when it dealt with mental illness and overall mental health, it didn't do so in a way that was particularly respectful for those that live with mental health issues and just general mental illness. And so those can be difficult to watch, but I definitely recommend watching The Spiral Staircase, as it deals with trauma and how trauma can affect us in a negative way, but also how we're not entirely our disability, regardless of what that disability is. And we also get to see a woman with a, relatively invisible disability. It does affect her everyday life, and it's quite apparent, but if you were to meet her just randomly, you wouldn't necessarily recognize it as such. And I do think it's important to talk about how things such as mutism and just people who are nonverbal in general, how that can affect their lives, even when they're in such dire situations as the main character in this movie. If you want to know more about it and you don't mind being spoiled, I do have a video of it on this channel, and any video or movie that I discuss in this that does have a other video for it will be linked in the description box below, as well up in the corners for you to watch if you want to. Cat People follows a young Serbian woman who fears that upon being sexually aroused, she turns into a Black Panther due to her family lineage. about this movie is for those who love horror and those who love anything that's adjacent to that, thriller, suspense, that a lot of what you see in those movies can easily be sent back to this film. Released in 1941, Cat People was produced by Val Lewton, who was really capable of creating horrific moments and a lot of suspense and not using a whole lot of money. He was known for being able to do a lot on a relatively small budget, and a lot can be learned from him. So if you're a fan of horror, suspense, or thrillers, I highly recommend watching Cat People, the original. I'm not really a big fan of the one from the 90s, as it brings in some subject matter that I'm personally not so much a fan of, though I do appreciate David Bowie's Cat People, of course. But that film I don't think really encompasses what I like, whereas Cat People does. One Body Too Many is a mystery horror comedy that was released in the 1930s, and it is quite funny. But I remember when I was watching it for the first time, and there's this first little scene that is setting everything up, and it just seems like super, I mean, it is very low budget, but it just didn't seem like it was going to be something that was particularly enjoyable. And then once I got past that scene, it was just generally funnier. The film follows an insurance salesman who is ready to go and sell some insurance. He has an appointment set up with this wealthy man, but unfortunately the man is already dead, and back at his house, his family has gathered for the will reading. Now his body is still in the house, he is in a coffin, and there's this big game of cat and mouse that occurs, and he gets caught in the middle. And I just think the actor in this movie is really great for this job, and I feel like if you're somebody who's really into comedy, this isn't quite slapstick, but there is a lot of energy behind it, and it's just like this cute little mystery. It's not very long, it's easy to watch, and it's also pretty easy to find. This next one is not only one of my favorite movies, but it's also adapted from one of my favorite books, and that is The Bad Seed. The Bad Seed follows a mother who fears that her young daughter is responsible from some pretty heinous things that's been happening in the neighborhood. This movie is great for anyone who just generally has a fear of young children, particularly young girls. You know, when you are in high school, or like you even get out of high school and you just don't want to be like if you don't know them personally, there's kind of this just it's flashback city, right? So when you see this little girl, she is creepy as hell, and the actress is phenomenal in this role, and it does ask and really kind of goes over that whole question of, is it nature versus nurture? And I feel like there is a conclusion that comes in both the book and the movie, but for me personally, I think nature versus nurture, there is no clear-cut answer to that. But in both the book and the film that are pretty similar, there's just some things that they couldn't go into as much detail. But I do recommend both book and movie, and it generally is just kind of creepy and uncomfortable, and to me, just kids in general, particularly in horror. I mean, I'm not every day going around being scared of kids, but in horror, kids definitely give me the creeps, the ick. If you haven't already seen this next film and you're a fan of Hitchcock or any of his contemporaries, you will have to flock to Max right now so you can watch Diabolique, a French film from the 1950s that follows a wife and her husband's lover as they plan and execute the murder of her husband. Of course, things don't go as smoothly as they want them to, and unfortunately, the man's fragile wife begins to experience crazy happenings. Unfortunately, a lot of the aspects of this movie may not get you in the same way that it would have at the time of its release, but I do remember watching it for the first time and absolutely falling in love with it. I heard about it through just generally being an Alfred Hitchcock fan, so if you're a big Hitchcock fan like me, I'm sure that you've at least heard of this movie, but I do highly recommend it. There's actually no music in the film, and that didn't even really occur to me until I had actually read some stuff on the movie. I'm a trivia person. I go to the trivia section of IMDb, I look up random things to make sure those things are real, and it's just, I like that. So that is one of the things that I learned in that. There's no music other than in the beginning, like the credits section. And I think that's a real testament into how sound is used. And of course, prior to the 1950s, they weren't really using music, and it would have been a lot more noticeable at that time since it was more accustomed to using music, but from a modern point of view and not recognizing that, I think it goes to show how great they use their sound. And for me, when it comes to film in general, but especially in horror films, the way sound is used really can add so much more to the film. The Night of the Hunter follows a man who identifies as a preacher who ends up infiltrating the home of a young widow and her 2 children in order to get to his former cellmate's loot. His cellmate went to prison for a bank robbery, and he wants to get his hands on the moolah. Now, this is a really important film to watch if you are just generally a fan of cinema, and if you're a fan of a lot of other directors, including Martin Scorsese and Spike Lee. There are moments in this film that are used in their films as well, including this speech, and he has the tattoos of love and hate on his knuckles, which you will also know from Spike Lee, and there's the speech that he uses. And one of the things I love about this movie too, and I generally just love about cinema in general, and like just watching it and studying it, as how you can recognize certain shots and scenes and how they relate to something else. German Expressionism was a big influence for this film and for the director, and German Expressionism was a big influence on pretty much film noir, that style in particular, and this film just went on to have a great influence as well on many other directors and cinematographers, as well as writers. And it's just one of the things that makes me sad is, unfortunately, this film was not a success upon its original release, but it has gone on to be a lot more successful, and I just wish that those involved really got to see how much more successful it would become over the years. But I highly recommend this for anybody who maybe loves film noir, or German Expressionism, French New Wave, Martin Scorsese, Spike Lee, and any kind of other directors that are in that sphere. And if you're into suspense, thrillers, and the way that there's also this sense of like this character is this everyday man, but he's also this monster, and just the way that he moves and the way that it's acted and the way it's directed, it's actually quite a very dark film, but it's also just very beautiful, especially if you are someone who just takes everything in as a viewer. Them is a relatively popular film out of the 1950s when people were really starting to fear the effects of war and the atomic bomb and anything like that. 10 years after atomic bomb tests in this area, and the results are them. And those are big giant ants. And can I just tell you, the ants that you will find in Louisiana are enough. So like I just like couldn't imagine being like faced with an ant that is so much bigger than me, because ants aren't particularly scary, but they're just, I mean, they can do a lot more damage when they're literally like, I don't know, rivaling King Kong or something. Films like this are pretty enjoyable, and if you're somebody who just wants to check out films from the 1950s that were relatively cheaply made and we're just really having fun, I also recommend checking out films, because I don't know if Them was actually one of those movies where they came up with the title prior to the filming of it, but Attack of the Giant Leeches is one, and I'll put down, I actually know I need to do a video of this too, so I'm not gonna list anymore. I'm just gonna say Them is possibly one of them, and I will confirm that on the screen. And Attack of the Giant Leeches. That one's been recommended to me by my dad. I need to check it out. And there's just a lot that's gonna happen this month, for spooky season, as we gear up for Halloween, the best time of the year. And so I'm kind of like giddy and just ready to talk about so many great fun things and spooky things and scary things. And I mean, sometimes that can get kind of sad too. So. Next on this list is an older film straight out of Norway, and it is Lake of the Dead, where a deadly phantom stalks the shore as a group of friends stay at a lakeside cabin. This movie was recently remade, and both can be found on the streaming app Shudder, though I do think Lake of the Dead, the original, can be found elsewhere as well. And this movie is a bit slow moving. It's very Scandinavian, particular of that time, but I do think if you watch a lot more modern Scandinavian stuff, you will find that a lot of that is really in Lake of the Dead as well. This is a bit of a classic from the Scandinavian side of the film world, which I'm definitely a fan of, and you do have to be in much more of a slow burn mood to enjoy Lake of the Dead, but I highly recommend it if you're looking for something that's supernatural, but that's not too heavy on the like, it's not necessarily trying to scare you, but it's like trying to infiltrate your mind, and there's dread. There's like a lot of dread. So if you're kind of into that kind of dread, haunting feeling and that uncertainty feeling, Lake of the Dead is for you. Next on this list is one straight out of the 70s, and this one is one where that I often question the quality, because it did have quite a few editing mistakes that you can catch relatively easy, but honestly today that is part of the charm, and it is The Sentinel. The Sentinel follows a young woman who's a model in NYC who is looking for her own apartment, and when she moves in, strange things begin to happen. She has strange neighbors, and she begins to see apparitions, ghosts, and all that jazz. And it's just, you know, your little apartment haunting and what's really going on with this gal. I will say that there's some stuff, particularly in the beginning, that's gross for no reason. I'm just gonna throw that out there. There is also something I'm not particularly a fan of, and that I think that I'm not a fan of. There's something that I'm not a fan of that hopefully we're in a much better place now, and there's definitely been things, like in what is it called? Basket Case? And in those, all of the characters are, they're not, their deformities are not something that people really do deal with, but unfortunately some of the people who were used in the Sentinel do have real disabilities and certain deformities. And I'm not a big fan of that, so I did just want to throw that out there, because if you don't want to watch it for that reason, that's perfectly like fine. And I just kind of remember going through a phase, because I'm really into like 1970s aesthetic and vibe, particularly in films. So The Sentinel was one of those. When I first saw it on what was it, 100 Scary Movie Moments on Bravo, that's where I had first heard of the film. So if you're kind of wanting that, that's great. Just be aware there are some things that could be like gross or triggering, or just not generally nice. The last but certainly not least film that we'll be talking about today is The Legend of Hell House, adapted by Richard Matheson from his novel Hell House. The film follows a group of psychics who are invited to Hell House, where a lot of paranormal activity has taken place, and they are meant to essentially capture the paranormal or something paranormal in order to prove that it does exist. And if they do so, they will get a lot of money out of it. So they all go in there, and unfortunately there have been two groups in the past that have done it before, and only one person has gotten out alive, and in this case it's Malcolm McDowell, who is returning to the scene of the crime where all the other people have died. And I honestly think that's enough proof that the paranormal might exist, and that some of them can be quite violent. But apparently, no, that is not enough for the super rich man who wants to pay these people to essentially capture some paranormal entities, materials, in order to prove to both himself and others that paranormal does exist, and what's been happening at Hell House is in fact real. It's a lot more complex than that. It's also a lot more a lot more like psychosexual in the book, and unfortunately it wasn't able to be brought to screen in the same way, but it's still present in the movie, and it's got very 1970s British Hammer horror vibes for it. I absolutely love the aesthetic, and it's very like foggy in nature. You do spend some time during the day, but it's got that very kind of like, again, foggy nature, a bit of like dark on the edges kind of thing. I love all the actors involved. It's a bunch of like English and American actors who were popular at the time, and all of them just work really well together to create a relatively to create a work really well together to create an entertaining film. And I'm a big fan of supernatural paranormal horror and haunted houses. And if that's something that's up your alley, I highly recommend checking out The Legend of Hell House if you haven't already, as well as checking out the book by Richard Matheson that it is based on. There is a few changes, such as the book being based in New York, while the film is based in London, and some others along the way. As I mentioned, not everything that was in the page could be adapted to screen, because it is quite a bit racier, but I do highly recommend them both. And if you have any other supernatural paranormal films that you would recommend, put them in the comments below, or just other films that you think would fit on this list and that you plan on watching in October. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch and or listen to this video. I really do appreciate it. This is my little corner of the internet, and I am so excited if you decide to stick around and want to join me as part of the Quiet Riot. I always want to hear from you, so if you have any recommendations or things that you would like to hear and see on this channel, and things that you want for either this season or in the coming months and next year, please let me know in the comments below. You can also let me know on community posts and other videos. I stick up with that. I don't have a lot of people making comments right now, so they're not so hard to find. But if you want to be a part of this channel more, just let me know in the comments, comment below. I also appreciate likes on the videos, as it does help appease, again, the algorithm demons. They're kind of working against me, so I really gotta up my game, and I'm certainly trying. I wish you guys the best out of your beginnings of October. I will see you a lot this month. It's my favorite time of year, my favorite season, my favorite month, my favorite holiday is coming up. I am a big fan of horror, suspense, and thrillers, so I've got a lot of material that I can share with you. And again, if you have any recommendations or requests, please let me know in the comments.